What happens when the most powerful beings in the galaxy discover that humanity's greatest strength isn't their technology, their weapons, or their numbers, but their capacity to love without condition? In a universe where immortal vampire royalty commands fleets of starships and entire solar systems bow to their ancient bloodlines, one princess will defy millennia of tradition. While alien emperors offer her galaxies and godlike beings promise her eternity, she finds herself drawn to the one species everyone considers primitive and worthless: humanity. But when the most feared vampire prince in the cosmos decides that what Princess Lyralii wants, he will take by force, humanity will prove that sometimes the greatest power isn't living forever, it's being willing to die for someone you love. This is the story of how one human's heart became the catalyst for the greatest war the galaxy has ever seen, and why even gods learned to fear the species that dared to love a monster. The crimson moon of Sanguinara cast its bloody light across the crystal spires of the vampire court, where beings older than civilizations gathered to witness what many considered an impossibility. Princess Lyralii Draconis, heir to the oldest vampire bloodline in the known galaxy, stood before the assembled nobility with an announcement that would shake the foundations of their ancient society. She had chosen a mate. The great hall fell silent except for the soft whisper of expensive fabrics as thousands of immortal beings shifted in their seats. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy had come to court the vampire princess over the past century. The Zephyrian Empire had offered her 3 star systems. The Crystalline Collective promised her a body made of living diamond that would make her truly immortal. The Void Touched had whispered secrets that could bend reality itself to her will. But Princess Lyralii had refused them all. Lord Malachar, the vampire prince whose own marriage proposal had been declined just months earlier, leaned forward in his obsidian throne. His red eyes glowed with barely contained fury as he watched the princess prepare to speak. For 3,000 years, he had pursued her across the galaxy, conquering worlds in her name, building monuments to her beauty, and eliminating anyone who dared to compete for her affections. "My lords and ladies," Princess Lyralii began, her voice carrying easily through the vast chamber despite speaking barely above a whisper. "I have indeed chosen my consort. But, before I reveal his identity, I must tell you about the species he represents." A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. Species? Surely she meant which noble house or ancient bloodline her chosen mate represented. "There is a young race," she continued, barely 50,000 years old, who call themselves humans. They live on a small blue world in the outer spiral arm of this galaxy, far from our great centers of power. They have no magic, no advanced technology, no genetic enhancements that would make them remarkable by our standards. Lord Malachar's expression shifted from fury to confusion, then, to something approaching amusement. "My princess," he said, rising from his throne with the fluid grace of a predator, "surely you jest. Are you speaking of those primitive creatures who still fight with chemical explosives and metal projectiles? The ones who die after barely 100 of their short years?" "I am," she replied without hesitation. The amusement in Malachar's eyes turned cold. "And which human lord has captured your fancy? Which of their warrior kings has proven worthy of vampire nobility?" Princess Lyralii smiled, and, for the first time in centuries, it was a smile of genuine happiness rather than diplomatic necessity. "His name is David Chen. He is not a lord or a king. He is what his people call a teacher. He instructs their young in mathematics and basic science." The silence that followed was deafening. Ambassador Vexthal of the Hive Mind Collective was the first to break it. His insectoid features clicked in agitation as he spoke. "Princess, with all due respect, have you suffered some form of mental contamination? The humans are barely above the level of animals. They lack even basic neural networking capabilities." "They cannot live forever," added the crystalline representative, her diamond voice ringing like wind chimes. "Their bodies are fragile, their minds limited by organic constraints. What could such a being possibly offer one such as you?" Princess Lyralii's eyes swept across the assembly, taking in the confusion, disgust, and growing anger on their faces. She had expected this reaction, but it still saddened her to see how little these ancient beings understood about the true nature of strength. "He taught me to dream," she said simply. The pronouncement sent another wave of murmurs through the crowd. Dreams were something vampires had lost millennia ago. Their ancient minds, filled with centuries of memory and experience, no longer possessed the capacity for the unconscious wanderings that marked younger species. For 3,000 years, Princess Lyralei continued, I have walked among you as one of the most powerful beings in existence. I command the blood of stars, I can reshape matter with a thought, I have lived through the rise and fall of 100 civilizations. And, in all that time, I had never once experienced wonder at something new. She paused, her gaze distant as she remembered. 6 months ago, I was conducting a survey of primitive worlds when my ship was damaged by a solar flare. We were forced to make emergency repairs on Earth, in a small human settlement they call a city. I took human form to avoid detection while my crew worked. And, that's where you met this, teacher? Lord Malakar's voice dripped with disdain. I was observing their educational system when I encountered him. He was attempting to explain the concept of infinity to a group of young humans, using their primitive mathematics. But, the way he described it. She shook her head in wonder. He made it beautiful. He helped them see that there were mysteries in the universe that even their limited science couldn't fully grasp, but that the attempt to understand was itself precious. The vampire lord's patience was clearly wearing thin. Princess, this is madness. You speak as though this creature performed some great feat, when he merely stated facts that any child in our society would know. But, that's exactly the point, she replied, her voice growing stronger. We know everything. We have lived so long, accumulated so much power and knowledge, that we have forgotten how to be amazed. When was the last time any of you felt joy at discovering something new? When did you last feel your heart race with excitement at the unknown? She gestured to the assembled nobles. Look around you. We are the most powerful beings in the galaxy, yet we spend our time in political maneuvering, ancient grudges, and the accumulation of ever more power we don't need. We have become immortal, but we stopped truly living centuries ago. You are young still, interjected Elder Vasquez, one of the most ancient vampires present. These feelings will pass. In another 1,000 years, you will understand that peace comes from accepting the natural order. Power serves power, immortal serves immortal. This human will be dead before you could blink, and you will be left with nothing but regret. That's where you're wrong, Princess Lyralei said, and her smile returned. David taught me something else. He showed me that the value of something isn't measured in how long it lasts, but in how deeply it touches you. A human poem that moves you to tears is worth more than an eternal monument that leaves you cold. Lord Malakar had heard enough. In one fluid motion, he was at the center of the hall, his tall form radiating menace. This human has clearly used some form of mind control or chemical manipulation. No vampire noble would naturally be attracted to such an inferior being. Be careful, Malakar, the princess warned, though her tone remained calm. You speak of my chosen mate. I speak of a pest that needs to be eliminated, he snarled. I will travel to this earth myself and end this ridiculous infatuation. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop several degrees as Princess Lyralei's own power began to manifest. Her eyes blazed with silver fire, and the air around her shimmered with barely contained energy. You will do no such thing. You would threaten the vampire court for a human? Malakar laughed, but there was no humor in it. Have you forgotten who you are? What you are? I know exactly what I am, she replied. I am someone who has remembered how to feel. I am someone who has learned that there are things more valuable than power, more meaningful than immortality. I am someone who has fallen in love. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Love was not something discussed in vampire courts. Alliances, yes. Political advantages, certainly. But love was considered a weakness, a chemical imbalance that stronger beings overcame through age and wisdom. Love, repeated Elder Vasquez, his ancient voice filled with contempt. A temporary madness that clouds judgment and leads to poor decisions. You will outgrow it, child. Will I? Princess Lyralei challenged. Or have I finally discovered what it means to be truly alive? When David looks at me, he doesn't see a vampire princess, heir to unimaginable power. He sees Lyra, a woman who helped him grade papers late one evening and who laughed at his terrible jokes about mathematical constants. He doesn't want to possess me or use me for political gain. He simply cares about me. She turned to address the full assembly. In 6 months of knowing David, I have felt more alive than in 3 millennia among you. He has shown me beauty in the simple things, the way sunlight looks through autumn leaves, the taste of food eaten for pleasure rather than sustenance, the comfort of falling asleep next to someone who wishes for nothing more than your happiness. Humans die, Lord Malachar stated flatly. Even if we ignore your clearly compromised mental state, this attachment will lead nowhere. He will age and perish while you remain unchanged. What then? Then, I will have had something real, she replied without hesitation. I will have had love, and wonder, and joy. I will have memories of someone who made me better than I was before. That's more than most immortals can say about eternity. The hall erupted in angry voices as nobles began arguing among themselves. Some called for the princess to be declared mentally unfit. Others demanded that the human be brought before the court for examination. A few suggested that perhaps this was all an elaborate jest that had gone too far. Through it all, Lord Malachar remained silent, his red eyes fixed on the princess with an intensity that made even the other vampires uncomfortable. When the noise finally died down, he spoke with deadly quiet. Very well, princess. If you insist on this course of action, then you force my hand. I challenge your human for the right to court you. The hall fell silent once more. A formal challenge was an ancient tradition, one that had not been invoked in over 1,000 years. It was considered a relic of more primitive times, but the law was clear: any suitor could challenge another for the exclusive right to pursue a noble's affections. Malachar, Princess Lyralei said, and, for the first time, there was real fear in her voice. David is human. He has no supernatural abilities, no enhanced strength or speed. A challenge between you would not be a contest, it would be murder. Then, perhaps your human is not as worthy as you believe, the vampire lord replied with a cruel smile. If he cannot defend his claim to your affections, then, perhaps he deserves to lose them. I will not allow it. You have no choice in the matter. Ancient law supersedes even royal preference in this case. The challenge has been issued and witnessed by the court. Your human has 30 of his days to prepare himself, or forfeit his claim to you entirely. Princess Lyralei felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had known this moment would come eventually, had known that her choice would not go unchallenged. But she had hoped for more time to prepare, to find a way to protect David from the political forces that would inevitably be arrayed against their union. There is another option, Elder Vasquez said, his ancient voice cutting through the tension. The princess could formally renounce her claim to the throne and leave vampire society entirely. In that case, she would be free to choose her own mate without court interference. The suggestion sent another wave of shock through the assembly. For a vampire noble to renounce their position was almost unheard of. It meant giving up not just power and privilege, but the protection and resources that came with membership in vampire society. Princess Lyralei began, then stopped. The offer was tempting, but she knew what it would mean. Without her protection, David would be vulnerable to any vampire who decided to eliminate him out of spite or amusement. Leaving the court wouldn't solve their problems, it would only make them worse. I need time to consider, she said finally. You have until the challenge date, Lord Malachar replied. 30 days to decide whether your human is worth dying for. Because make no mistake, princess, when I face him in combat, only one of us will walk away. The vampire lord turned and strode from the hall, his black cloak billowing behind him. The other nobles began to disperse as well, breaking into small groups to discuss this unprecedented development. Some were clearly excited by the prospect of entertainment. Vampire challenges were rare and, usually, spectacular. Others seemed more concerned about the political implications of having a human connected to the royal bloodline. Princess Lyralei remained in the center of the hall, surrounded by empty space as even her allies seemed unsure how to approach her. She had made her choice, but the consequences were only beginning to unfold. As the last of the nobles filed out, she found herself alone except for her personal guard and a few trusted advisors. Elder Seraphina, her former mentor, approached with careful steps. Child, the elder vampire said softly, you know I have always supported your independence of thought. But this may be beyond even your considerable abilities to resolve. You think I should abandon him, Princess Lyreli, I said. It wasn't a question. I think you should consider the full scope of what you're attempting. It's not just about one human, Lyreli. If you succeed in legitimizing this union, you will change vampire society forever. There will be those who see it as weakness, as corruption of our bloodline. There could be civil war. The princess was quiet for a long moment, staring up at the crimson moon through the crystal ceiling. Seraphina, in all your centuries of existence, have you ever been truly happy? The elder vampire blinked in surprise at the question. Happy? That's not really the point, is it? We are vampires. We exist to serve the greater purpose of our species, to maintain order and stability across the galaxy. But, have you ever been happy? I've been satisfied. Content with my achievements, pleased with successful outcomes to various endeavors. That's not the same thing, Princess Lyreli, I said, turning to face her mentor. Satisfaction and contentment are pale shadows of what I feel when I'm with David. When he smiles at me, when he shares his thoughts about his students or shows me some new aspect of human culture I hadn't considered, it's like a fire in my chest, Seraphina. It makes me want to be better, to deserve the way he looks at me. And, when he dies, the elder asked gently. When time takes him from you, what happens to that fire then? Princess Lyreli was quiet for a moment. I don't know, she admitted. But, I would rather burn bright for a short time than never truly live at all. Elder Seraphina sighed, a sound like wind through ancient trees. Then, I suppose we had better start preparing for war. Because if you're determined to follow this path, Malachar will ensure that your human doesn't survive long enough to make you a widow. David is stronger than you think, the princess said, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. Humans have a way of surprising people. For your sake, child, I hope you're right. Because in 30 days, we'll find out just how much your human heart is willing to sacrifice for love. As Princess Lyreli finally left the empty hall, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just set events in motion that would change everything, not just for her and David, but for every human in the galaxy. The vampire court had never been known for accepting change gracefully, and she had just handed them the greatest challenge to their worldview in recorded history. But, as she thought about David's smile, about the way he made even mundane moments feel magical, she knew she would make the same choice again. Love, she had discovered, was worth any price, even war among the stars. David Chen was grading physics papers in his small apartment when reality as he knew it came to an end. He had just marked another student's confused attempt to explain gravitational waves when the air in his living room began to shimmer like heat rising from summer pavement. The mathematical equations he'd been reviewing suddenly seemed laughably simple compared to the impossibility unfolding before his eyes. A figure materialized from the shimmering air, tall, elegant, with silver hair that seemed to move with its own wind and eyes that held depths David had only seen in his dreams of the cosmos. Lyra stepped into his world carrying the scent of distant stars and wearing an expression that mixed love with something approaching desperation. David, she said, and her voice carried harmonics that made his name sound like music. We need to talk. He set down his red pen with the careful precision of someone whose mind was struggling to process what his eyes were showing him. Lyra? How did you? My door is locked, and I'm on the 20th floor. She moved toward him with fluid grace, each step making no sound on his cheap carpet. I haven't been completely honest with you about who I am. David looked at the woman who had walked into his life 6 months ago and turned it upside down. The woman who had appeared in his classroom as a visiting scholar, who had asked questions about human education that were both insightful and strangely naive. The woman who had somehow made him fall in love with the universe all over again through her eyes. You're not really a researcher studying human social structures, are you? He asked, his teacher's instinct for recognizing when someone was hiding the full truth finally kicking in. No, she admitted, settling onto his worn couch with unconscious dignity that made the shabby furniture look like a throne. My name is Lyreli Draconis. I am a princess of the vampire court, heir to a bloodline older than your species' written history. David blinked. Then, he laughed, a short bark of disbelief. Vampire? Lyra, vampires aren't real. They're mythology, folklore. Stories people invented to explain things they didn't understand. In response, she held up her hand. Her human disguise flickered like a television with poor reception, revealing pale skin that seemed to have its own inner luminescence, fingernails that curved into deadly points, and eyes that blazed with silver fire. For just a moment, David saw her as she truly was, beautiful and terrible and utterly inhuman. Then, the disguise snapped back into place, and she was just Lyra again. Lyra, who had helped him reorganize his lesson plans. Lyra, who had listened with fascination as he explained why he loved teaching. Lyra, who made terrible coffee but whose smile could light up his entire day. Holy! David started, then caught himself. You're serious. You're actually serious. I'm sorry I deceived you, she said, and her voice carried a weight of genuine regret. But I needed to know who you really were, not how you would react to what I am. And, David, what I discovered was someone unlike anyone I've met in 3,000 years of existence. 3,000 years, he repeated faintly, sinking into his desk chair. You're 3,000 years old. I know it's a lot to process. I know this changes everything between us. But, David, I need you to understand something. What we have, what I feel for you, it's real. More real than anything I've experienced in my entire existence. David stared at her, his mind racing through implications and impossibilities. Why, he asked finally. Why me? If you're what you say you are, if you're some kind of immortal alien princess, why would you care about a high school physics teacher from Seattle? Lyra smiled, and it was the same smile that had first caught his attention months ago, warm, genuine, without any of the guardedness he was used to seeing in people. Because you made me remember what it means to be amazed. Do you remember that first day, when you were explaining to your students how every atom in their bodies was forged in the heart of a dying star? He nodded, remembering her standing in the back of his classroom, supposedly observing his teaching methods for her research. You told them that they were literally made of starlight, she continued. And, the way you said it, it wasn't just a scientific fact to you. It was a miracle. You helped them see that they were part of something vast and beautiful and mysterious. In my world, David, that sense of wonder died out centuries ago. We know so much, have so much power, that nothing surprises us anymore. But, you find magic in mathematics, beauty in the way light bends around massive objects, joy in watching young minds discover the secrets of the universe. Lyra! He began, but she held up a hand. There's more you need to know. The reason I'm here, why I'm telling you all of this now. My court has discovered our relationship. They disapprove. I imagine they would, David said, some of his natural analytical thinking reasserting itself. I'm guessing vampire princesses don't usually date humans. They don't date anyone, usually. Marriage among my kind is typically a political alliance, an arrangement between powerful bloodlines. The concept of choosing a mate based on emotional attachment is foreign to them. David felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. And, what exactly does their disapproval mean for us? Lyra was quiet for a long moment, and, when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. One of the vampire lords, Malachar, has issued a formal challenge. In our society, when two suitors compete for the same person's affections, they can resolve the dispute through single combat. Combat, David repeated. As in fighting. As in a battle to the death. The words hung in the air between them like a physical weight. David felt his mouth go dry as the full implications hit him. Lyra, I'm a math teacher. I exercise by walking to the corner store. The most dangerous thing I do is change light bulbs on a ladder. This Malachar guy is what, some kind of ancient supernatural warrior? He's over 4,000 years old and has personally conquered 17 star systems, she admitted. His strength could tear apart a spacecraft with his bare hands. His speed makes him faster than your quickest aircraft. He's survived battles that would make your greatest wars look like minor disagreements. David laughed, but there was no humor in it. So this is basically a death sentence with extra steps. David, listen to me, Lyra said, moving to kneel beside his chair. You don't have to accept the challenge. If you refuse, Malachar wins by default, and I would be expected to consider his courtship. But you would be safe. You could return to your life, your teaching, your normal human existence. And, you? I would probably be married to a being I despise within the year. David looked into her eyes, those impossible, beautiful eyes that had captivated him from the first moment he'd seen her. What happens if I accept the challenge? Then, you have 30 days to prepare, however you can. At the end of that time, you face Malachar in single combat with whatever weapons and abilities you possess. And, the odds of me surviving? Lyra was quiet for so long that David had his answer before she spoke. I won't lie to you, David. In terms of pure physical capability, you have no chance against him. None. He could kill you before you even realized the fight had begun. But? David prompted, sensing there was more. But, humans have a reputation in the galaxy, even among beings as arrogant as vampires. You're known for finding ways to overcome impossible odds. Your species has a talent for innovation, for thinking outside conventional parameters when your backs are against the wall. So your plan is for me to outthink a 4,000-year-old vampire lord who's probably forgotten more about strategy and warfare than I'll ever know? My plan, Lyra said firmly, is to find a way to save the man I love. Even if it means defying every law of my society and making enemies of beings who could destroy entire worlds. David was quiet for a long time, staring out his window at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere out there, people were living their normal lives, going to work, raising families, worrying about mortgages and test scores and whether their favorite sports teams would make the playoffs. Simple, human concerns that seemed impossibly distant now. Tell me about him, he said finally. This Malachar. What's he like? Arrogant, Lyra replied without hesitation. Cruel. He sees other beings as either tools to be used or obstacles to be eliminated. He's courted me for centuries, but he's never once asked me what I want or what would make me happy. To him, I'm a prize to be won, not a person to be loved. And he's powerful? Incredibly. But, David, power isn't everything. I've seen beings with godlike abilities make simple mistakes because they couldn't imagine that anyone would dare oppose them. Overconfidence can be a weakness. David nodded slowly, his mind already starting to work through possibilities. It was a teacher's instinct, when faced with a seemingly impossible problem, break it down into manageable pieces and look for patterns, for leverage points where a small application of force could create large effects. What are the rules of this challenge? Traditional vampire law allows each combatant to use any weapons or abilities they naturally possess. No outside interference is permitted once the challenge begins. The fight continues until one participant yields or dies. Any weapons or abilities I naturally possess, David repeated thoughtfully. That's interestingly vague. What counts as natural for humans? I'm not sure. The law was written centuries before my kind had any significant contact with your species. It might include human technology, human knowledge, even human allies if you could convince others of your species to participate. David felt a small spark of hope kindle in his chest. What about preparation time? These 30 days, am I allowed to train, to research, to prepare however I see fit? Yes, as long as you don't seek supernatural enhancement or outside magical assistance. But, human enhancement would be acceptable? Human technology, human science? Lyra's eyes widened slightly as she began to understand his thinking. The law says abilities you naturally possess. If humans naturally possess the ability to create technology, to enhance themselves through their own science, then maybe this isn't quite as hopeless as it seems, David finished. He stood up and began pacing, his teacher's mind shifting into the mode he used when preparing particularly challenging lesson plans. I need information. Everything you can tell me about vampire physiology, about Malachar specifically, about the combat rules and the arena where this will take place. David, are you saying you'll accept the challenge? He stopped pacing and looked at her. Lyra, 6 months ago you asked me why I became a teacher. Do you remember what I told you? She nodded. You said that every day, you get to show young minds that the universe is more amazing than they ever imagined. You said that seeing that moment of understanding dawn in a student's eyes made every frustration worthwhile. Well, David said with a smile that was equal parts terrified and determined, it looks like I'm about to find out just how amazing this universe really is. And, maybe, just maybe, I'll get to show a 4,000-year-old vampire that humans are more than they appear to be. Lyra stood and moved toward him, stopping just close enough that he could feel the inhuman warmth radiating from her skin. David, I won't lie to you. Even with preparation, even with every advantage we can legally give you, this is still almost certainly a death sentence. Are you sure you want to do this? He reached out and took her hands, marveling at how they felt both familiar and utterly alien. Lyra, 3 days ago my biggest worry was whether the school board would approve my request for new lab equipment. Now I'm apparently about to fight an interstellar vampire lord for the right to date an alien princess. My life has officially become too weird to back down from. Despite everything, she laughed. It was a sound like silver bells, beautiful and musical and completely at odds with the dire nature of their situation. I love you, she said simply. I love you too, he replied. And I'm going to prove it by doing something so impossibly stupid that it'll either become the greatest love story ever told or the shortest. David? Yes? When I said humans have a reputation for overcoming impossible odds, I wasn't just trying to make you feel better. Your species defeated the Zarathi invasion fleet with primitive nuclear weapons and sheer stubborn refusal to surrender. You've survived plagues that killed billions and come back stronger. You've built civilizations on worlds that should have been uninhabitable. If anyone can find a way to make this work, it's a human. David nodded, feeling the weight of not just his own survival, but the reputation of his entire species settling on his shoulders. Then, I guess it's time to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten a human's family. As they began to plan for the impossible, neither of them noticed the small surveillance device that had materialized in David's apartment when Lyra first arrived. Lord Malachar was many things, but he was not in the habit of leaving anything to chance. The humans' acceptance of the challenge would make this more interesting, but the vampire lord was confident that no amount of preparation could bridge the gap between mortal and immortal. He was about to learn why vampires had never successfully conquered humanity, despite considering them barely above animals. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The war for love had officially begun. Dr. Elena Vasquez had seen some strange things in her 30 years as a military scientist, but nothing quite like the woman sitting across from her in the classified research facility beneath NORAD. The visitor called herself Lyra, claimed to be conducting research on human defensive capabilities, and had somehow obtained security clearances that shouldn't exist. What really caught Elena's attention, though, was that all of Lyra's questions seemed focused on one very specific human, David Chen, a high school physics teacher from Seattle who had no business being on any military's radar. So you want to know about human enhancement technologies, Elena said carefully, her fingers dancing across her tablet to bring up the relevant files. May I ask why this information relates to Mr. Chen specifically? David is about to face a challenge that will require him to perform beyond normal human parameters, Lyra replied with the kind of diplomatic non-answer that Elena associated with people who had clearances higher than her own. We need to understand what options might be available to him. Elena studied the mysterious woman more carefully. There was something about her that seemed almost too perfect: skin without a single blemish, hair that caught light in ways that didn't quite make sense, eyes that seemed to hold depths beyond normal human experience. Either she was the product of some very advanced genetic engineering, or she wasn't entirely human herself. Well, Elena said, deciding that discretion was the better part of curiosity, the good news is that we've made significant advances in temporary human enhancement over the past few years. Nano-enhancement technology, combat stims that can boost strength and reflexes by orders of magnitude, cognitive enhancers that can accelerate thought processes to superhuman levels. How significant are these enhancements? Elena pulled up a video on her tablet, showing combat test footage of soldiers moving with impossible speed and precision. A properly enhanced human can lift up to 5 tons, move fast enough to dodge projectile weapons, and think through complex tactical problems in seconds rather than minutes. The downside is that most of these enhancements are extremely dangerous to use and have severe time limits. Define dangerous. The nano-enhancement protocol has about a 60% survival rate, Elena admitted. The human body wasn't designed to operate at those levels of performance. Even if the subject survives the initial enhancement, there's significant risk of organ failure, neural damage, and psychological breaks from the stress. Lyra was quiet for a moment, and Elena could see something like pain flash across her perfect features. And the time limits? Most enhancement protocols last between 15 minutes and 2 hours before the subject's body begins to shut down. After that, they need immediate medical intervention or they die. So we could give David incredible abilities for a short period, but it would likely kill him even if he survived whatever challenge he's facing. Elena blinked at the casual use of David's first name. Ma'am, are you personally involved with Mr. Chen? He's someone very important to me, Lyra replied simply. Someone I would do anything to protect. There was something in the way she said it that made Elena's military instincts prick up. She had heard that tone before, from soldiers talking about protecting their families, from parents discussing threats to their children. It was the voice of someone who had already decided they would sacrifice anything necessary. There might be another option, Elena said slowly. It's experimental, completely untested on humans, and, frankly, it's probably insane to even consider it. I'm listening. Elena pulled up another set of files, these marked with classification levels that technically required presidential approval to access. We've been working on something we call the quantum consciousness interface. The theory is that human consciousness, under the right conditions, can interface directly with quantum fields to manipulate probability at the subatomic level. In layman's terms? In very simplified terms, it would allow a human to essentially rewrite the laws of physics in a localized area. Temporarily and, at enormous personal cost, but theoretically possible. Lyra leaned forward, her eyes blazing with sudden interest. What kind of personal cost? Well, the interface requires connecting the subject's nervous system directly to a quantum field generator. The process is intense. Most test subjects have suffered complete neural cascade failure within minutes. And that's just from simulation runs, we've never actually tried it on a living person. But it would give David the power to face supernatural opponents on equal terms? Elena paused, suddenly, realizing that this conversation had taken a distinctly non-military direction. Ma'am, are you suggesting that Mr. Chen is going to face supernatural opposition? Because I feel like I should point out that officially, the US military doesn't acknowledge the existence of supernatural phenomena. Unofficially? Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. Unofficially, we've had an entire department dedicated to studying anomalous phenomena since 1952. We know there are things out there that conventional science can't explain. We just don't talk about them at dinner parties. And you've encountered vampires? The question was asked so casually that it took Elena a moment to process what she'd heard. Vampires? As in, actual vampires? Blood-drinking, immortal vampires? Among other things, yes. Elena stared at the woman across from her, and, suddenly, a lot of strange details began falling into place. The impossible security clearances. The too perfect appearance. The way she seemed to know things about classified projects that should have been need-to-know only. You're not human, Elena said. It wasn't a question. No, Lyra replied simply. I'm not. And David Chen, high school physics teacher, is somehow involved with your people? He's involved with me. And my people disapprove strongly enough to issue a formal challenge that will almost certainly result in his death unless we can give him some way to fight back. Elena set down her tablet and rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. Okay. So you're telling me that a human civilian is about to fight an actual vampire in some kind of formal duel, and you want me to help enhance him to superhuman levels so he has a chance of surviving? That's a very accurate summary, yes. And if I refuse? Then, David dies, and humanity loses one of the most genuinely good people I've ever encountered. Also, depending on how the political situation develops, there's a non-zero chance that my society decides to take a more active interest in your planet. An interest that would not be beneficial to your species' continued existence. Elena was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. There are factions among my people who view humans as little more than animals. If they see David's defeat as proof of human inferiority, they may decide that Earth would be better served under vampire rule. I'm trying to prevent that outcome by helping one human fight one vampire. Sometimes the fate of civilizations turns on the outcome of single battles. David isn't just fighting for his own life, or even for our relationship. He's fighting to prove that humans deserve to be treated as equals rather than as pets or prey. Elena stood and walked to the window, looking out at the mountains surrounding the facility. Somewhere out there, millions of people were going about their daily lives with no idea that their entire future might depend on a high school teacher from Seattle. The quantum consciousness interface is still theoretical, she said finally. We've run computer simulations, but we have no idea if it would actually work on a real person. And, even if it does work, there's a high probability that using it would kill the subject anyway. What would you need to make it viable? Time, mostly. And test subjects. And probably about 3 years of additional research to work out the safety protocols. We have 22 days. Elena turned from the window to stare at Lyra. 22 days to perfect an experimental technology that we've been working on for 5 years? That's impossible. Dr. Vasquez, may I share something with you that very few humans know? Your species has a reputation among the galactic community. Not as warriors, not as conquerors, but as the beings who make impossible things happen when they're properly motivated. Reputation for what? For being absolutely, brilliantly, dangerously insane when someone threatens your families. Lyra smiled, and, for the first time, Elena caught a glimpse of something inhuman in her expression. Humans are the only species in known space who have ever successfully fought off an invasion by beings with superior technology by essentially strapping explosives to themselves and refusing to surrender. You're the only species who has ever responded to extinction-level threats by working harder instead of accepting defeat. Elena felt a strange mix of pride and terror at the description. And, you think that reputation is enough to overcome the laws of physics and medical impossibility? I think that if anyone can find a way to make this work, it's humans. Specifically, humans who are protecting someone they care about. Elena was quiet for a moment, then reached for her phone. I'm going to need to make some calls. And I'm going to need to meet David Shin personally before I agree to anything. Of course. And I want full disclosure about what he's facing. No diplomatic euphemisms, no gentle language. I need to know exactly what kind of opponent we're preparing him to fight. Lyra nodded. Lord Malachar is over 4,000 years old. He has personally killed thousands of beings in single combat. His strength is sufficient to tear through most metals. His speed makes him essentially invisible to normal human perception. He can heal from wounds that would be instantly fatal to humans, and he has combat experience spanning multiple galactic wars. Jesus Christ, Elena muttered. We're not just trying to enhance a human to superhuman levels. We're trying to create a god. No, Lyra corrected. We're trying to save the man I love, and prove that humans are capable of far more than anyone gives them credit for. The godlike abilities are just a bonus. Elena picked up her tablet and began making notes. I'm going to need a full technical briefing on vampire physiology. Strengths, weaknesses, anything that might give us an edge. Vampires are functionally immortal and incredibly difficult to kill by conventional means, Lyra began. However, they do have limitations. Our enhanced abilities drain energy, so sustained combat can weaken us. We're vulnerable to certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. And, most importantly, we're not accustomed to fighting opponents who can match our physical capabilities. Meaning? Meaning that Malachar has never faced an enemy who could hit as hard as he can, move as fast as he can, or think as quickly as he can. His entire fighting style is based on overwhelming superiority. If we can negate that advantage, even temporarily, he'll be fighting a type of battle he's never experienced before. Elena nodded, her mind already racing through possibilities. What about the quantum interface affecting probability? Could we essentially stack the deck in David's favor? I'm not sure I understand. Well, if David can manipulate quantum fields to affect probability, then, theoretically he could make it more likely that his attacks will connect and less likely that his opponent's attacks will hit him. Small nudges to physics that might not be noticeable but could accumulate into significant advantages. Lyra's eyes brightened with something approaching hope. That could actually work. Vampires rely heavily on their speed and precision in combat. If those advantages were subtly compromised, then, suddenly, the fight becomes much more even, Elena finished. It's still incredibly dangerous, and David would still be risking his life just by using the enhancement, but it might actually be possible. Dr. Vasquez, I need you to understand something. If we do this, if we enhance David and he somehow manages to defeat Malachar, the political repercussions in my society will be enormous. There will be vampires who see David's victory as a threat to our entire way of life. And they may decide that the only way to restore the natural order is to eliminate the human threat entirely. David winning could be the catalyst for an invasion of Earth. Elena set down her tablet and looked directly into Lyra's impossible eyes. Are you telling me that saving David's life might doom our entire planet? I'm telling you that the future is uncertain, and that every choice we make has consequences we can't predict. But I'm also telling you that if David loses, if humanity is seen as weak and defenseless, invasion becomes much more likely anyway. So we're damned if we do and damned if we don't. No, Lyra said firmly. If we do nothing, we're definitely damned. If we fight, if David proves that humans are capable of standing equal with immortals, then maybe we buy your species a chance at a different future. Maybe we prove that Earth deserves to be treated as an equal partner rather than a potential colony. Elena was quiet for a long moment, weighing impossible odds against unacceptable alternatives. Finally, she picked up her phone again. I'm calling together the best team of engineers and scientists this facility has ever assembled, she said. We're going to do the impossible in 3 weeks instead of 3 years. And then, we're going to send a high school physics teacher to fight a vampire lord for the future of human civilization. Dr. Vasquez? Yes? Thank you. Elena smiled grimly. Don't thank me yet. Thank me if David survives. Thank me if this insane plan actually works. Thank me if we don't accidentally kill the nicest guy in the world while trying to save him. As Elena began making the calls that would mobilize some of the most classified research programs in human history, she couldn't help but think that this was exactly the kind of impossible, dangerous, brilliantly insane plan that had made humanity's reputation among the stars. She just hoped they could live up to that reputation when it mattered most. The arena materialized around them like a fever dream made manifest. David stood on crystalline sand that stretched for miles in every direction, under a sky filled with 3 crimson moons and stars arranged in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The vampire court had chosen neutral ground for the challenge, a pocket dimension that existed between realities, where the laws of physics were more like suggestions and the only rule was survival. David flexed his fingers, feeling the quantum enhancement coursing through his nervous system like liquid lightning. The past 3 weeks had been a blur of medical procedures, training sessions, and technological integration that pushed the boundaries of what the human body could endure. He could feel the interface humming in his mind, a constant awareness of probability fields and quantum fluctuations that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Dr. Vasquez had been right about the risks. The enhancement was killing him slowly, each second shaving time off his life as his cells struggled to process energy levels they were never designed to handle. He could feel his DNA beginning to break down, could sense his organs operating far beyond their design parameters. He had maybe 2 hours before complete system failure, less if he pushed the enhancement to its limits. But, for those 2 hours, he was more than human. The quantum interface allowed him to nudge probability in small ways, making it slightly more likely that his reflexes would respond correctly, slightly less likely that his opponent's attacks would find their mark. Combined with the physical enhancements that made him stronger and faster than any unmodified human, it might be enough. It had to be enough. Lord Malachar appeared at the opposite end of the arena with the dramatic flair that seemed to be standard among vampire nobility. He materialized from shadow itself, tall and imposing in black armor that seemed to absorb light. His red eyes found David across the impossible distance and he smiled, revealing fangs that glittered like razors. So, the vampire lord called out, his voice carrying easily across the arena, the princess's pet human has actually come to face his betters. How refreshingly naive. David didn't respond immediately. Instead, he used the quantum interface to analyze his opponent, to feel the probability fields that surrounded the ancient vampire. What he found was both terrifying and, oddly reassuring. Malachar was exactly what Lyra had described: incredibly powerful, impossibly fast, with reflexes honed by millennia of combat experience. But there was something else there too, something David recognized from his years of teaching. Arrogance. The kind of absolute certainty that came from never being truly challenged, never having to question whether you might be wrong about something fundamental. You know, David said, his enhanced voice carrying across the arena with perfect clarity, I've been a teacher for 15 years. And, in all that time, I've learned that the students who are most certain they already know everything are usually the ones who learn the least. Malachar's smile widened. How profound. Tell me, little human, what exactly do you think you can teach me about combat? About power? About the natural order of things? I'm not here to teach you anything, David replied, settling into the fighting stance that 3 weeks of intensive training had burned into his muscle memory. I'm here to prove something to myself. The vampire lord laughed, a sound like breaking glass. And, what exactly are you hoping to prove? That love makes you stronger, not weaker. That caring about someone enough to risk everything for them doesn't make you vulnerable, it makes you capable of things you never thought possible. The arena fell silent except for the whisper of impossible winds. In the viewing area that existed somehow both above and around the fighting space, thousands of beings from across the galaxy watched in fascination. Vampire nobles sat beside crystalline entities and energy beings, all waiting to see whether the human would provide entertainment or simply die quickly. Princess Lyralia sat in the place of honor, her face a mask of controlled terror as she watched the two most important people in her universe prepare to try to kill each other. She could feel the enhancement burning through David's system, could see the way his human form was struggling to contain energies that should have been impossible for his species to channel. Begin! Elder Vasquez's voice boomed across the arena, and the challenge commenced. Malachar moved first, crossing the distance between them in a blur of speed that should have been impossible to track. But David's enhanced perceptions caught the movement, and the quantum interface nudged probability just enough to let him dodge aside at the last possible second. Vampire claws that could have torn through steel passed harmlessly through the space where he had been standing. The vampire lord spun with fluid grace, bringing his other hand around in a backhand that would have decapitated a normal human. David ducked under it and drove his fist toward Malachar's ribs with enhanced strength that could punch through concrete. The vampire twisted aside, but not quite fast enough. David's punch grazed his armor, leaving a crack in what should have been impenetrable protection. Malachar looked down at the crack in disbelief. Interesting, he murmured. You're faster than you should be. Maybe you're slower than you think you are, David replied, already moving again. What followed was unlike any combat either of them had ever experienced. Malachar had centuries of fighting experience, but all of it was against opponents who were either vastly weaker than him or similar to him in capability. He had never fought someone who matched his physical abilities but fought like a human unpredictably, creatively, with a willingness to take risks that no immortal would consider. David, meanwhile, was fighting the battle of his life with abilities that were literally killing him as he used them. Each exchange drained more of his enhanced strength, pushed his modified body closer to complete failure. But the quantum interface was working, subtle manipulations of probability that made Malachar's strikes just slightly off target, that made David's defensive moves just slightly more effective than they should have been. The vampire lord began to notice the pattern after several minutes of combat. His attacks, which should have connected easily, were missing by millimeters. His opponent's defenses, which should have been overwhelmed by superior speed and strength, were holding up against impossible odds. What manner of human sorcery is this? Malachar snarled as another of his attacks went wide by the barest margin. It's not sorcery, David gasped, blood running from his nose as the enhancement burned through his nervous system. It's science. Quantum mechanics, specifically. I'm manipulating probability at the subatomic level. Impossible. Humans don't possess such abilities. You're right, David admitted, dodging another clawed swipe. Humans don't possess these abilities naturally. But what humans do have is the ability to look at impossible problems and find solutions that no one else would consider. We have the ability to build tools that let us do things we were never meant to do. David's next attack caught Malachar across the chest, enhanced strength driving vampire claws through supposedly impenetrable armor. The vampire lord staggered back, black blood flowing from the wounds, his expression shifting from amused disdain to something approaching concern. "You would destroy yourself to defeat me?" Malachar asked, and David could hear the genuine confusion in the ancient being's voice. "These enhancements are burning through your life force. You'll be dead within the hour whether I kill you or not." "Maybe," David agreed, pressing his attack despite the growing pain in his chest as his heart struggled to pump blood through a system operating at impossible levels. "But, in that hour, I get to show the entire galaxy something important. Which is that humans don't back down when someone threatens our families." The next exchange was faster and more vicious than anything that had come before. Malachar abandoned his previous restraint and attacked with the full fury of a being who had conquered star systems through personal combat. His claws moved in patterns too complex for normal perception to follow, his speed reaching levels that made him little more than a blur even to enhanced senses. But David met him move for move. The quantum interface was burning out his brain cell by cell, but it was also allowing him to predict attack patterns by analyzing probability cascades. Each of Malachar's strikes created quantum ripples that David could read and respond to. Not perfectly, he was accumulating wounds, his enhanced healing struggling to keep pace with the damage he was taking. But he was holding his own against an opponent who should have killed him in seconds. The watching crowd had fallen completely silent. What they were seeing was unprecedented: a human, enhanced through his own species' technology, fighting as an equal with one of the most powerful vampires in existence. Bets that had been placed on how quickly David would die were being hastily reconsidered. In the royal viewing area, Princess Lyralia gripped the arms of her chair so hard that the crystal began to crack. She could see what the enhancement was doing to David, could watch his life force burning away with each passing moment. But she could also see something else: the look of absolute determination on his face, the way he moved not just to survive but to prove a point about what love could make someone capable of. The turning point came when Malachar made his first serious mistake. Frustrated by his inability to quickly overcome what should have been an inferior opponent, the vampire lord overextended himself on a particularly vicious attack. David saw the opening and took it, driving his enhanced fist directly into Malachar's solar plexus with enough force to crack the crystalline arena floor beneath them. The vampire lord doubled over, genuine pain flashing across his features for the first time in the fight. David followed up with an uppercut that sent his opponent flying backward across the arena, to crash into the crystal sand with an impact that shook the pocket dimension. Malachar rose slowly, his armor cracked in multiple places, his perfect features marred by cuts that were healing much more slowly than they should have been. He looked at David with something approaching respect for the first time. "How?" he asked simply. David wiped blood from his mouth, his enhanced hearing picking up the irregular rhythm of his own heartbeat as his body began to shut down. "Because I'm not fighting for conquest or dominance or political advantage. I'm fighting for love. For the right to spend whatever time I have left with someone who makes me want to be better than I am." "Love," Malachar repeated, as though the word was foreign to him. "You would die for an emotion? A chemical reaction in your primitive brain?" "I would die for the woman who taught me that the universe is even more beautiful than I thought it was. I would die for the chance to prove that what we have together is more real than all your power and immortality combined." The vampire lord was quiet for a moment, studying David's battered but still defiant form. "And what happens when your enhancements fail? When your body shuts down and you die whether I kill you or not? What happens to your precious love then?" David smiled, and, despite the blood and the pain and the knowledge that he was dying by degrees, it was a smile of pure joy. "Then, I'll have spent the last moment of my life proving that humans are capable of miracles when we're protecting the people we care about. And maybe, just maybe, I'll have changed how the galaxy sees my species." He raised his hands, the quantum interface flaring to its maximum output as he prepared for one final exchange. "So what do you say, Lord Malachar? Ready to see what a human can do when he has nothing left to lose?" The vampire lord nodded slowly, settling into his own fighting stance. "Very well, human. show me this miracle of yours. What happened next would be talked about in vampire courts for centuries to come, and would become the foundation for a new understanding of humanity's place in the galactic community. But, in that moment, as two impossible opponents prepared for their final clash, there was only David Chen, high school physics teacher, preparing to prove that love really could conquer all. Even if it killed him in the process. The final clash lasted exactly 14 seconds. David pushed the quantum interface beyond all safety parameters, feeling his neural pathways burning out as he channeled forces that no human was meant to contain. His perception of time dilated, stretching those 14 seconds into an eternity of perfect clarity where every movement, every decision, every probability cascade was crystal clear in his failing mind. Lord Malachar came at him with 4,000 years of combat experience distilled into a perfect killing strike. The vampire lord moved faster than thought, his claws tracing patterns in the air that would have been impossible to avoid under normal circumstances. But these were not normal circumstances. David didn't try to dodge. Instead, he used the quantum interface to collapse the probability wave that governed Malachar's attack, nudging it from a 97% chance of connecting to a 43% chance. Then, he stepped into the attack rather than away from it, using the vampire's own momentum against him while driving his enhanced fist toward Malachar's heart with every remaining ounce of strength his dying body could muster. The probability cascade that followed was beautiful in its complexity. David's attack, which should have had only a 12% chance of penetrating Malachar's defenses, suddenly had a 68% chance. The vampire lord's killing strike, thrown off by David's unexpected movement and the subtle manipulation of quantum forces, missed by exactly 3 centimeters. David's fist connected with Malachar's chestplate with the force of a small meteor strike. The vampire lord's armor, which had protected him through centuries of warfare against beings capable of destroying mountains, cracked like an eggshell. The impact drove through his supernatural defenses, through flesh and bone that was harder than steel, and, for the first time in 4 millennia, Lord Malachar felt his heart stop. The arena fell silent except for the sound of the vampire lord hitting the crystal sand 30 feet away, his body limp and unmoving. David stood swaying in the center of the arena, blood streaming from his eyes and nose as the quantum interface finally burned out his nervous system completely. His enhanced strength was gone, his superhuman speed reduced to the trembling movements of a man whose body was shutting down one system at a time. But he was still standing. And Malachar was not. The silence stretched for long moments as the assembled beings tried to process what they had just witnessed. A human, a mortal creature with a lifespan that was barely a footnote compared to their own existences, had just defeated one of the most powerful vampires in the galaxy through sheer determination and impossible science. Elder Vasquez rose from his seat in the viewing area, his ancient voice carrying easily through the pocket dimension. The challenge is concluded. The human has proven his worth. Princess Lyralii was moving before the elder had finished speaking, teleporting directly into the arena to catch David as he collapsed. She cradled his head in her lap, her own tears falling onto his battered face as she assessed the damage the enhancement had done to his system. It was extensive. Fatal. The quantum interface had burned out most of his neural pathways, his organs were failing from the stress of operating at superhuman levels, and his cellular structure was breaking down at the molecular level. By all rights, he should already be dead. But his eyes were still open, still focused on her face with an expression of pure love and satisfaction. "Did I win?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You won," she confirmed, her voice breaking. "David, you won. You magnificent, impossible, ridiculous human, you actually won." He smiled, and it was the same smile that had first captured her heart in a classroom half a galaxy away. "Good. That's good. I was worried the math might be off. David, don't talk. Save your strength. I can heal you, I can use vampire blood to regenerate your damaged cells." "No," he said firmly, somehow finding the energy to squeeze her hand. "Lyra, listen to me. If you use vampire abilities to heal me, it changes what happened here today. It becomes a story about vampire magic saving a human rather than humans proving they can stand on equal ground with immortals. I don't care about the politics," she sobbed. "I care about you. I care about you too. More than I ever thought it was possible to care about someone. But, Lyra, what we did here today, it changes everything. Not just for us, but for every human in the galaxy. They'll never be seen as inferior again. Around them, the assembled beings were beginning to react to what they had witnessed. Representatives from dozens of species were speaking in hushed tones about the implications of human enhancement technology. The vampire nobles looked shaken, their entire worldview challenged by the sight of their greatest warrior laid low by a creature they had considered barely above an animal. In the royal viewing area, Elder Seraphina leaned over to speak quietly with Princess Lyraliai's father, the vampire king. Your Majesty, this changes the political landscape considerably. If humans are capable of this level of enhancement, if they can produce warriors capable of defeating our nobility in single combat. King Draconis nodded slowly, his ancient eyes never leaving the sight of his daughter cradling the dying human. Yes, I see the implications. The question is whether we adapt to this new reality or attempt to suppress it. And, your decision? The vampire king was quiet for a long moment, watching his daughter's obvious grief and remembering what it had felt like to love someone that deeply. It had been centuries since he had experienced such emotion, but seeing it in his daughter brought back memories of what it meant to value something beyond power and politics. We adapt, he said finally. Alert the Council that we will be opening formal diplomatic relations with Earth. If humans are capable of producing warriors like this one, then we need them as allies rather than subjects. Meanwhile, in the arena, David was fighting to stay conscious long enough to say the things that needed to be said. The quantum enhancement was completely burned out, but the physical modifications Dr. Vasquez had made were still giving him a few extra minutes of life. Lyra, he said, his voice growing weaker. I need you to promise me something. Anything. When I'm gone, don't let this be the end of human-vampire relations. What we found together, what we proved is possible, it should be the beginning of something beautiful between our species. David, please. Let me heal you. Let me save you. He shook his head slightly. I'm dying, love. The enhancement process was always going to be fatal. We knew that going in. But, look around us, look at how the representatives from other species are reacting. They're not seeing humans as primitive anymore. They're seeing us as potential partners, as equals worth negotiating with. Princess Lyraliai followed his gaze and saw that he was right. The assembled beings were talking excitedly among themselves, and she could catch fragments of conversations about trade agreements, defensive pacts, and cultural exchange programs with Earth. One human's death for the elevation of an entire species, David continued. That's not bad math, even by my standards. You're not just any human, she protested. You're the human I love. You're the person who taught me to dream again, who showed me that there's still wonder in the universe. And, you're the vampire princess who taught a high school teacher that love really can overcome any obstacle. David's breathing was becoming more labored, but his eyes remained clear and focused on her face. Lyra, I need you to know something. These past 6 months, falling in love with you, being loved by you, it was worth everything. Even this. Even knowing it would end like this. David. I used to think that the most beautiful thing in the universe was the way light bends around massive objects, or the mathematical elegance of quantum mechanics, he whispered. But, I was wrong. The most beautiful thing in the universe is the way you smile when you think no one is watching. The way you get excited about simple human customs like birthday cakes and holiday decorations. The way you made me feel like the luckiest man in any galaxy. The tears were flowing freely down her face now, but she managed to speak. I love you, David Chen. I will love you for as long as I exist, which will be forever. I love you too, Princess Lyraliai Draconis. And, I want you to do something for me. What? I want you to keep teaching the universe that love makes us stronger, not weaker. Show them that caring about someone enough to risk everything isn't foolishness, it's the closest thing to magic that actually exists. David's eyes began to close, but he forced them open one more time. And, maybe find a way to visit Earth sometimes. There are so many things I wanted to show you. Pizza. Snow. The way the aurora borealis looks from my hometown in Alaska. I'll see all of it, she promised. I'll learn about every human custom, visit every place that was important to you. I'll make sure your species knows they have a friend among the vampire courts." David smiled one last time, an expression of perfect peace and contentment. "Then, I can go knowing that everything worked out exactly the way it was supposed to." His hand went limp in hers, and David Chen, high school physics teacher and the first human to defeat a vampire lord in single combat, died with the woman he loved holding him close under alien stars. The arena remained silent for several minutes as Princess Lyralii grieved over his body. No one moved to interrupt her, not even the vampire nobles who had opposed their relationship. What they had witnessed had changed something fundamental about how they viewed both humans and the nature of strength itself. Finally, Elder Vasquez spoke again. "Princess Lyralii, the challenge has been completed and witnessed. By ancient law, your choice of mate has been validated. Though he is gone, David Chen has earned his place in vampire history as a warrior worthy of royal regard." She looked up at the elder, her face streaked with tears but her voice steady. "He was always worthy. All of his species are worthy. It just took this to prove it to the rest of you." King Draconis teleported into the arena, approaching his daughter with careful steps. "Lyralii, I know you are grieving. But we must discuss what happens next. This human's victory has significant political implications." "What happens next," Princess Lyralii said, rising to her feet with David's body still cradled in her arms, "is that we honor his sacrifice. We open formal relations with Earth. We offer them membership in the galactic community as equal partners, not as subjects or pets. And we make sure that David Chen's name is remembered as the human who proved that love really can conquer anything." The Vampire King nodded slowly. "And you? Will you return to court, resume your duties as heir to the throne?" Princess Lyralii looked down at David's peaceful face, then back at her father. "I'll return to court, yes. But first, I have a promise to keep. I'm going to Earth to learn about pizza and snow and the aurora borealis. I'm going to make sure David's students know that their teacher died a hero. And I'm going to establish an embassy between our worlds so that this kind of misunderstanding never happens again." "Very well," the king agreed. "But when you return, you will find that the vampire court has changed. Today's events have shown us that our old ways of thinking about other species need to evolve. Perhaps it's time we remembered that strength comes in many forms." As the arena began to dissolve around them, returning the assembled beings to their respective home dimensions, Princess Lyralii held David's body close and made a silent vow. His death would not be in vain. It would be the foundation for a new era of cooperation between humans and vampires, proof that love really could bridge any gap between species. And sometimes, late at night when